A message to mighty ones among the nations. There is no neutral ground left. The lines have been drawn not by men, but by the unfolding of history itself, and history in this hour is the instrument of judgment. The systems you built, the alliances you forged, the weapons you stockpiled, the narratives you wove, none of them can shield you from what has already begun. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning you can ignore until the next election cycle or quarterly report. This is the summoning of the accounts you thought you had buried. For decades you have fed yourselves on the illusion that your power was untouchable because it was systemic, rooted in laws you wrote, markets you manipulated, armies you commanded, and information you controlled. You mistook complexity for invincibility, but the truth is brutal and inescapable. Every mechanism you have relied on has become an open conduit for your exposure. Every fortress you have built is cracking from within. You have called yourselves leaders, but you have led in plunder. You have called yourselves protectors, but you have protected nothing but your own gain. You have cloaked theft in the language of law, predation in the language of policy, exploitation in the language of progress. You have devoured the vulnerable in the light of day and imagined no one was watching. But the witness has seen, the judge has recorded, and the time of verdict has come. This is the scroll of your undoing. It is not written in the language of diplomacy, but in the language of finality. It will not be revised in committee or negotiated at summit tables. It flows from the mouth of the one before whom all nations are less than nothing, before whom the earth itself is but a footstool. If the earth is his footstool, what are you, dust and water, parading your might before him as if you are anything? And so it begins, not with your titles, your ranks, your laurels, but with the truth that strips them all away. There will be many fallen former stars in the pantheon of civilian governments, national security, and the private sector here and around the world. If you want to know some of them, look at who is trying the hardest to intimidate, silence, censor, slander, and accuse anyone who seeks the truth or may know the truth about what has occurred. Then ask them if they are willing to go down for those who are the real culprits they have been doing the dirty work for, because all of it is coming out. We know who you are. We have already wired anything you attempt to do to prevent it for maximum exponential exposure and destruction. How do you like mutually assured destruction now? Are you ready for that? I did warn you that you will reap what you sow. The sword is unsheathed, and the greater sickle is now in hand and will cut yours down. Welcome to harvest time at the end of the age of the kingdoms of sand. You always did love a good mystery, didn't you? Well, this one you created is about to have the most surprising, even shocking reveal in history. What is your decision? Surrender or go down to Sheol with your pride and crimes? Here is the reality. Most have no idea the scale of the cosmic mutually assured destruction model now in play. Every one of your systems and machinations plundering the world is now being matched with at scale national disasters that will destroy your entire global system and all of your nation's power until they all relent. Call it God's checks and balances system. It will always defeat all of yours. My spirit has witnessed entire armies, cities, and civilizations be destroyed in the blink of an eye by singular natural calamities all throughout history. Yet you think with all your technologies and weapons you are immune and even powerful enough to test your delusions out against heaven, do you? Ask yourselves how well your nations are already doing in being systematically dismantled by natural calamities even now. Who are you? Do you think your fragile as glass civilization can sustain the next hits by the earth and heavens? Do you now? In the halls of civilian government, in the chambers of national security, and in the boardrooms of the private sector, here and across the world, there are many who once stood as celebrated figures, who now stand on the precipice of ruin. Their names are not unknown to us. They identify themselves, even without accusation, by their conduct in this hour. Look carefully those who strain with the greatest fury to intimidate, to silence, to censor, to slander, and to accuse any who dare to seek the truth, or who may hold the knowledge of what has truly transpired, are revealing their guilt, by the very violence of their suppression. You will see them in their frantic measures, their hasty decrees, their coordinated denials. These are the ones. To you, I ask plainly, are you prepared to descend into disgrace, perhaps even into destruction, for the sake of those whom you have served in shadows, those who are the real architects of these crimes? You have done their bidding, carried their messages, enforced their will, and in doing so have bound yourself to their guilt. And now the moment comes when your loyalty will be tested, not in whispers or in secret orders, but in the full glare of history's judgment. Will you shield them still, when the truth cannot be hidden, or will you separate yourself before the collapse drags you into their ruin? Make no mistake, every measure you take to prevent this reckoning has already been anticipated, mapped, and countered. Your strategies are wired for maximum exposure. Your manipulations are set to amplify their own failure. The harder you pull the levers, the faster the machinery of your own destruction accelerates. This is no idle threat. The architecture is already in motion. Your methods, long effective in the shadows, now serve as the very signal that guides the light to your hidden vaults. And so I put the question to you plainly, how do you like the doctrine of mutually assured destruction now? You embraced it in the age of nuclear brinkmanship. You calculated its risks, confident that your deterrence would hold so long as fear restrained your adversary. But you miscalculated. This is no longer an equation of missiles and megatons. This is a cosmic model, a divine counterpart to your own doctrine, in which every system you have built to exploit and plunder the earth is now being met, measure for measure, with calamities beyond your control. Do you imagine this is mere chance? I tell you, it is a checks and balances system older than your nations, older than your empires, older even than the civilizations whose ruins you now study. The author of this design needs no vote, no treaty, no alliance to enforce it. Your economic engines, your intelligence networks, your military projections, all will prove powerless against the sequence now unfolding. I have seen, in the testimony of history and the witness of my own spirit, entire armies erased in the space of a heartbeat. I have watched civilizations vanish into dust beneath a single natural event, a quake, a wave, a plague, a wind. You believe your technology makes you untouchable, that your weapons place you beyond the reach of heaven's judgment. But your record stands against you even now. How well have your nations fared against the floods, the fires, the droughts, and the storms that already dismantle your infrastructure? How well have your economies recovered from the disasters that strike with neither warning nor negotiation? You are entering the season of the harvest, and the harvesters do not ask the grain for permission. The sword is drawn, the greater sickle is lifted high. The kingdoms of sand will be cut down, for they were built without foundation. The time of mystery is ending, and the great reveal, unforeseen by you, though written from the beginning, will shatter your illusions. So now I present you with the final decision. There will be no delay, no hidden corridors in which to bargain, no safe harbor to which to flee. You will either surrender, lay down your weapons, abandon your schemes, and submit to the judgment that is already upon you, or you will follow your pride and your crimes down into Sheol. And when you arrive there, you will find no crown, no throne, no monument, only the silence of those who thought themselves gods and discovered too late that they were dust. The matter is before you. Choose swiftly. The age of the kingdoms of sand is over. You have mistaken accumulation for security and the applause of lesser men for legitimacy. Your towers rise, but they are hollow. Your coffers overflow, but the gold within them is tarnished with the sweat, blood, and futures of those you have exploited. You call it growth, success, strategic advantage, but every ledger you keep is an indictment, every surplus a monument to theft. What you celebrate as ingenuity is, in truth, parasitism perfected over generations. Your kind have always cloaked greed in the language of necessity, draping avarice in the garments of national interest or shareholder value. But the reality is more base. You have stripped the earth bare, plundered its peoples, poisoned its waters, and destabilized its nations, all while congratulating yourselves for innovation. And yet, with all your cunning, you have not learned the simplest truth, that no empire built upon theft can endure beyond its appointed hour. That hour has come. You have mistaken control for wisdom. You have mistaken intimidation for leadership. You have mistaken manipulation for diplomacy. The systems you revere, the councils, the secret committees, the digital surveillance grids, are not fortresses. They are prisons of your own design, and you are their inmates. The walls you have built to keep truth out will, in the moment of reckoning, keep you in. You flatter yourselves that you have mastered human nature, that your behavioral models and psychological operations can steer the masses like cattle. But you are the ones who have been herded, by greed into folly, by hubris into overreach. You believed your propaganda so completely that you mistook it for reality. You congratulated yourselves on deceiving the world, even as you became the first and greatest victims of your own illusion. You thought the game was rigged forever in your favor. You assumed there would always be another lever to pull, another pawn to sacrifice, another country to destabilize for profit. But you have exhausted the board. The levers are breaking. The pawns are turning their faces toward you. And the world you have bled to keep in subjugation is learning that it does not need you to survive. You prided yourselves on being indispensable. Now the truth will show you to be replaceable. The collapse of your markets will not be mourned. The dissolution of your agencies will not be lamented. Your names will not be honored but cursed, etched into history as examples of what happens when those entrusted with power worship themselves instead of the truth. You thought to build kingdoms upon sand because you believed the tide could be tamed. You believed your signatures could command the seas, that your satellites could map every threat, that your algorithms could anticipate every movement. But the tide rises, the storms form, and the hand that moves them is not yours. You may control the screens, but you do not control the sky. The hour is coming, and in truth has already begun, when your titles will be worth nothing, your security clearances nothing, your alliances nothing. Those who now cheer your cruelty will scatter. Those who now hide behind your shadow will flee into the light, if only to save themselves. And when the wave falls, there will be no dignity left in you, only the stark knowledge that you were offered the chance to step back, to surrender, to repent, and you refused. You have gambled everything on the belief that the reckoning would never come in your lifetime. That is the greatest of your miscalculations. The harvest you thought to delay has ripened in your own day, and the sickle swings in your own time. You will watch the kingdoms of sand crumble, not from the safety of some distant future, but from the midst of their collapse, with the dust of their ruin still in your lungs. The choice remains, though the window narrows with every hour. Yield now, or be crushed under the weight of your own devices. The era of your illusions is over. The truth will not negotiate, and heaven will not forever contend with your pride and rebellion. Ask the generation of Noah, they testify to this. Ask Sodom and Gomorrah, they also testify to this. Ask the might men of the ancient empires what they think about you and your kingdoms of sand, silicon, and glass. They will also testify as to your utter idiocy and foolishness. You have long depended on the illusion of inevitability. By controlling the flow of information, you shaped the narrative so that dissent seemed futile and resistance seemed suicidal. You manufactured the perception that your will was the tide, and the rest of the world merely driftwood in its current. But inevitability is the first illusion to collapse when reality asserts itself. Once a single breach in the narrative occurs, the perception of control shatters. That breach is here. Every lie you have told must now be defended at exponentially higher cost, draining the very capital, political, financial, and human. You need to maintain power. You are bleeding out to protect fictions, and the effort is accelerating your decline. You have weaponized fear as governance by keeping entire populations in a perpetual state of uncertainty, terror of economic ruin, disease, war, or environmental collapse. You ensured that people would accept increasingly draconian measures. Fear was your greatest currency, but you failed to understand that fear has a half-life. When it is constant, it ceases to paralyze and begins to enrage. What once kept populations compliant now drives them to unpredictable and uncontrollable acts of defiance. The very fear you relied on, as a leash, is fraying, and when it snaps, it will recoil against you with more force than you have ever imagined. You have sustained your authority through institutional capture, by infiltrating and corrupting the organs of law, education, media, finance, and science. You believed you could rewrite reality itself. In the short term, it worked. Judges ruled according to your needs, schools rewrote history to your liking, journalists recited your talking points, and scientists bent the data to your objectives. But this saturation has created a singular vulnerability. When one pillar collapses, it weakens them all. You tied the fate of every captured institution to the others, creating an interdependent system of rot. And rot does not repair itself. It accelerates until the entire structure falls. You perfected selective justice. You prosecuted enemies for the smallest infractions, while granting allies immunity for the gravest crimes. This double standard was meant to demonstrate your control over outcomes, to make loyalty the only path to survival. But the ledger of your hypocrisy has been recorded in the minds of millions, and it will not be forgotten. Even now, the technology you use to track and catalog the movements of the populace is being turned inward, archiving your orders, your communications, your networks of protection. What you use to surveil others will now stand as the evidence against you. You operated through the laundering of legitimacy. By creating the appearance of consensus, via think tanks, staged panels, compliant international bodies, you wrapped your private interests in the language of public good. You mistook theatrical agreement for enduring trust. But legitimacy, once unmasked, cannot be restored. The realization that so many decisions were made not in service to the people, but to the enrichment of a small cabal, is not one a population forgets. The burn of betrayal cuts deeper than the pain of oppression. You relied on the inertia of the machine. You assumed that because the global system was vast, interconnected, and reliant on countless moving parts, no one could dismantle it without bringing ruin on themselves. This calculation ignored the single truth that now undoes you: the system is already devouring those who serve it. As its extraction model collapses under its own inefficiencies, people will welcome its destruction rather than fear it. You are learning too late that a system designed to enrich only the few will find few defenders when the crisis comes. And underpinning it all, you were driven by hubris, the belief that you were too entrenched to fail, too clever to be caught, too necessary to be replaced. Hubris blinded you to the truth that history has no permanent seats for tyrants. The bones of kings and the dust of empires testify to one unchanging law: power without humility devours itself. You are not the exception. You are its next example. The collapse is not coming, it is unfolding. The mechanisms you once wielded as instruments of control are turning into engines of exposure. Your narratives are breaking down faster than you can replace them. Your fear campaigns are mutating into public fury. Your captured institutions are corroding in full view. Your double standards are seeding revolt among those you once ruled without challenge. Your legitimacy laundering is now read as farce. Your machine's inertia is becoming its own anchor, dragging you down, and your hubris, your one true constant, is now the weight that will hold you under until you do not rise again. The fatal sequence. The first crack appears when a central lie, one on which multiple policy decisions, public directives, or enforcement actions are based, is exposed beyond your ability to suppress it. This breach need not be the largest or most damaging truth. It need only be undeniable and visible enough to force public acknowledgement. Once your ability to define truth in the public sphere is contested, every subsequent statement you make is received with suspicion. From that moment, every word, every press release, every staged event becomes evidence not of your strength, but of your desperation. Step 2. Loss of fear compliance. As the narrative breach spreads, fear loses its potency. The public begins to weigh the risks of defiance against the certainty of your corruption, and for an increasing number, defiance becomes the rational choice. Your control mechanisms, emergency, powers, economic threats, reputational destruction no longer deter dissent. Instead, they provoke it. Small acts of defiance multiply, spreading horizontally, bypassing centralized leadership and thus eluding your ability to neutralize them. Step 3. Institutional fracture. Captured institutions, media, judiciary, finance, intelligence begin to experience internal division. Not all who serve you are equally loyal. Many are merely opportunists who will abandon you the moment your grip loosens. Early defections destabilize your inner circle, forcing you to devote disproportionate resources to suppress or punish the defectors. This only accelerates further defections. Institutions once monolithic now operate with competing factions, and your capacity to enforce coherence disintegrates. Step 4. Emergence of counter-narrative infrastructure. Independent networks, media channels, economic exchanges, parallel technologies begin to function outside your regulatory reach. In the early stages, you ignore them, assuming they are too small to matter. This is your second fatal error. By the time you recognize their threat, they are no longer isolated experiments, but interconnected ecosystems. They bypass your choke points entirely, rendering your censorship and financial controls obsolete in those spheres. Every suppression attempt you make drives more people toward these alternatives. Step 5. Legitimacy collapse. Without the monopoly on narrative or the capacity to enforce compliance through fear, your authority now rests entirely on the perception that you are still legitimate. That perception erodes rapidly as your mismanagement, hypocrisy, and failures are laid bare. International partners distance themselves to protect their own standing. Domestic allies retreat to preserve what remains of their reputations. What was once your greatest intangible asset, public acceptance of your right to rule, evaporates. At this stage, even loyal operatives begin calculating post-collapse survival strategies that no longer include you. Step 6. Strategic paralysis. Decision-making grinds to a halt as your inner circle fractures into rival camps, each attempting to salvage their own position. Conflicting orders are issued, some ignored outright, others undermined in execution. The paralysis is compounded by the fact that every move you make is now interpreted through the lens of corruption and illegitimacy. Even actions that might stabilize the system are rejected because they come from you. Step 7. Economic and operational breakdown. With narrative control gone, fear ineffective, institutions fractured, counter-networks thriving, legitimacy evaporated, and strategic paralysis in place, the economic engines that sustained your reach begin to stall. Contracts are canceled, supply chains realign without your permission, and foreign capital withdraws. Intelligence and security services, sensing the end, quietly sell or withhold operational data. Your capacity to project force beyond your immediate strongholds collapses. Step 8. Accelerated implosion. The final phase is self-perpetuating. Every loss of control creates conditions for further losses at greater speed. Your enforcement apparatus is now a liability, its every action broadcast dissected and used to rally opposition. Regional authorities, seeing your weakness, act autonomously. Former allies publicly condemn you to clear their names. The implosion feeds on itself until what once seemed unshakable vanishes in months, weeks, even days. Step 9. Terminal accountability. With no narrative, no fear compliance, no functioning institutions, no legitimacy, no coordinated strategy, and no economic engine, you stand exposed. The crimes you committed under the shield of power are no longer hidden by complexity or protected by allies. The very systems you built to surveil and control others, data collection, communications archives, operational logs, become the open book of your prosecution. The harvest you thought to evade has come, and the reaping is total. Step 10. Historical verdict. What remains of you is not your name as you knew be, remembered not for your triumphs, but for the swiftness and completeness of your undoing. The record will show that you were offered the opportunity to stand down, to cut your losses, to relinquish your seat at the table before the collapse became irreversible. You refused, and so you were destroyed, not by a greater enemy, but by the inevitable consequence of your own devices. It but the lesson you have become. You will. And now, having strutted across the stage for your brief moment, you imagine yourselves titans. You measure your might in divisions and fleets, in currency reserves and trade flows, in data centers and orbital constellations. You recite your GDPs as though they were eternal inscriptions. You parade your weapons as though they could scar the heavens. You imagine your decrees are fate itself. But you have never once stopped to consider how you appear to the one before whom all nations are less than nothing. You think yourselves vast because you compare yourselves to one another, like ants boasting of their anthill beside the mountain. But your scope is pitiful when measured against the hand that spans the heavens. The earth itself is his footstool. Your capitals, your stock exchanges, your fortresses are smaller than the dust clinging to that stool's edge. You strut like gods, but you are only dust suspended in water, animated for a breath, then returned to the ground from which you came. You imagine that your armies could intimidate him who calls the stars by name. You think your treaties could bind the one who speaks and the wind obeys. You think your sanctions, your blockades, your embargoes could weigh upon him, whose voice shatters cedars and melts mountains. Your strategic councils whisper over maps, thinking to redraw borders. Do you not know that he weighs continents as a jeweler weighs a stone? You boast of your intelligence services, as though you could outthink him who knows the thoughts of men before they are formed. You speak of your surveillance networks, as though you could outwatch him whose eyes range across the earth without rest. You mutter of deterrence and escalation, as though you could threaten him who speaks and the sea withdraws, who withholds the rain and turns your granaries to dust. You have confused his patience for his absence. You have mistaken his silence for consent. But the time has come when his derision will be made plain. For the Lord sits in the heavens and laughs, not with amusement, but with scorn. He holds you in contempt. Your pomp is mockery, your counsel is foolishness. The great declarations you carve into history will be remembered only as the scribbles of madmen who thought to overrule the Ancient of Days. You parade your fleets across oceans, but he counts your ships as nothing. You launch your rockets into the skies, but he calls the stars, and they do not answer to you. You send your envoys to craft alliances, but he dissolves nations with a word. You celebrate your longevity, centuries of empire, decades of rule, but before him 1,000 years are as a day, and your reigns are less than the blink of an eye. And still, even in the shadow of your undoing, you cling to your vanity. Even as your markets crack and your cities flood, as your borders burn and your towers crumble, you imagine that you will repair it all, that your cleverness will shield you from what is to come. You will not. The hand that scatters the nations is moving, and there will be no council, no coalition, no vault of gold that will slow its work. You will go down as the generation that mistook dust for power and breath for eternity. You will be the cautionary tale for ages to come. The parable told to children about the kings and rulers who shook their fists at the heavens and were buried under the weight of their own arrogance. For the nations are as nothing before him, and if the earth itself is his footstool, then you, oh, you with your banners and your crowns, are less than the dust upon it. Then hear the end of the matter. Your hour is finished. Your crowns are cast down into the mud. Your scepters lie splintered in the dust. Your banners, once held high, are trampled under the feet of those you thought forever beneath you. The breath you boasted of was never yours. It was lent, and now it is withdrawn. Your riches return to the earth. Your fortresses crumble. Your alliances dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You will not rise again, for you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. The judge of all the earth has spoken, and the sentence is irreversible. You are as chaff before the wind, driven, scattered, and consumed in the fire. No epitaph will preserve your glory, for there was none. No monument will honor your memory, for it is a stench. And when the ages speak of you, it will not be in reverence, but in warning. Thus perish all who exalt themselves against the Lord of hosts. When the earth shakes and the waters rise, when the winds strip cities bare and the fires leave only ash, the masks fall. In the first hours you see the builders, the ones who dig through the rubble with bare hands, who give without being asked, who bind the wounds of neighbor and stranger alike. But soon the carrion circle begins to tighten. From the shadows the predators emerge, corporations, financiers, and political agents whose trade is not in aid, but in acquisition. They arrive with contracts instead of compassion, with briefcases instead of bread. They speak the language of investment and recovery, but their hands are in the pockets of the dying. Land stripped from the desperate. Businesses taken for a fraction of their worth. Generational homes and livelihoods harvested in the chaos, converted into portfolios and balance sheet gains. This is not capitalism, it is disaster feudalism. And the men and women behind it know precisely what they are doing. They have studied how to turn grief into equity. They have refined the art of converting human loss into shareholder profit. They wait for the moment when defenses are down, when the will to fight is smothered under exhaustion and despair. They move in while the bodies are still being buried. They call it market efficiency. Heaven calls it theft. Do not think for a moment that this evil goes unseen. The God who weighs the nations sees the ledgers written in blood. The judge of all the earth does not need your quarterly reports to know the measure of your corruption. Your PR campaigns cannot cover the stench of the lives you've stripped bare. History is merciless to predators like you. Every empire built on the bones of the vulnerable rots from within. The rage of the dispossessed does not fade. It concentrates, condenses into a force that will, in time, break your gates and dismantle your halls. And when that day comes, the mercy you denied will be denied to you in full measure. The same cold precision with which you plundered will be the precision with which your ruin is executed. This is the truth you try to bury under glossy campaigns of resilience and preparedness. You plaster the word community over your thefts, but when the quake hits, when the storm makes landfall, the fraud is exposed. Relief funds vanish into opaque bureaucracies. Emergency supply chains are gamed for profit. Contracts go to cronies. Laws meant for protection are twisted into instruments of consolidation. You exploit the chaos not to serve, but to seize. Do not call this the market at work. It is the commodification of human suffering. It is an extraction system perfected for the moment when your target is weakest. It is the deliberate mapping of disaster as a point of maximum yield, and the judgment for it will be no metaphor. It will be as real as the flood, as final as the fire, as unstoppable as the quake. Even the citizenry are laid bare in such moments. Some rise with sacrificial courage, giving until they have nothing left. Others reveal their rot, hoarding food, inflating prices, and feeding fear for personal gain. The crucible shows the truth, government, corporation, and citizen alike. And what it shows now is damning. You cannot hide behind market theory or legal immunity. The Lord weighs you, not in currency, but in righteousness. And if a nation's character is revealed in its disasters, then the record against you is clear. You have chosen plunder over protection. You have chosen profit over mercy. You have chosen your seat in the carrion circle, feeding on the ruin of others. As it is for the people, so too for the nation and nations. The disaster that strips the home will strip the empire. The fire that consumes the field will consume the throne. The wave that sweeps away the marketplace will sweep away the crown. And when it does, your name will not be remembered for what you built, but for what you devoured. And so it is that when the Lord humbles the nations with the tremor, the tempest, and the flame, the first to fall are the masks. The glossy veneer of strength and compassion peels away, revealing what has always been beneath, the carrion circle. In the first days the builders rise. Those who will shovel the mud from a neighbor's doorway, share their bread with strangers, lift the fallen from the wreckage without thought of recompense. But soon, from the edges of the ruin, the scavengers creep in. They come not in rags but in tailored suits, not with shovels but with contracts, not with outstretched hands but with clawed ones. They arrive in the name of recovery and investment, but their gospel is seizure and subjugation. They survey the wreckage not for where to help, but for what can be taken. The storm is not their tragedy, it is their opening bid. In the shadows of calamity they strip the desperate of their land, their shops, their livelihoods. They take generational homes for the cost of a month's rent. They buy the tools of tradesmen for less than the scrap value of the metal. They scoop up contracts for rebuilding. only to inflate invoices and cut corners until walls rot before they are finished. This is no capitalism. This is disaster feudalism, a return to the ancient order where ruin is the currency of the powerful and suffering is the harvest field of the rich. They have studied the algorithms of despair. They know how long it takes for grief to turn into desperation, how quickly savings evaporate when work is gone and roads are broken. They know the window between tragedy and resignation, and they are there before the blood dries, before the smoke clears, ready to turn anguish into asset. Do not imagine that such precision goes unnoticed. The one who numbers the hairs on every head also numbers the deeds you have done in the dark. The judge of heaven has seen the ledgers, where you convert another man's loss into your profit. He has heard the hollow speeches you give, layered in false compassion, while your fingers close around what was never yours. History is not gentle with those who fatten themselves on the ruin of others. Every empire of vultures collapses beneath its own stench. The rage of the dispossessed is not quenched by time. It ripens, hardens, and one day breaks loose with the force of floodwaters behind a shattered dam. And when it comes, the mercy you withheld will be withheld from you. The cold efficiency with which you plundered will be the cold efficiency with which you are unseated. And yet you persist, clothing your predation in the language of commerce. You call it market forces when you seize the homes of the widow and the land of the fatherless. You call it efficiency when you replace skilled labor with the cheapest bidder in a disaster zone. You call it necessary risk when you gamble with the lives of those who have no shelter but what you permit. But the truth is plain. You do not create, you consume. You do not heal, you harvest. Even the people are laid bare in such days. Some give until they have nothing left to give. Others, like you, store their barns in the hour of famine, waiting for the price to rise before they will sell grain to the starving. These moments reveal the soul of a nation, and the soul you have revealed is hollow. As it is for people, so too for the nation and nations. The quake that topples the hut will topple the palace. The fire that sweeps the field will sweep the capital. The flood that drowns the valley will wash over the citadel. The same hand that shakes the mountains will strike the thrones. And when your name is spoken in the years to come, it will not be in gratitude, but in warning. Thus fall all who feast upon the suffering of the weak. The hour comes without warning, though the signs were written plainly in the heavens and in the earth. Your offices stand but empty. Your towers rise but hollow. The roads that once carried your convoys now carry none for you. The phones ring, but no one answers. Your allies, who once praised your cunning, have vanished into the wind, each seeking to preserve themselves. You stand in the silence you once imposed on others, and for the first time you hear it clearly. It is the sound of your reign ending. The people you dismissed as powerless have gathered. Their faces are not the faces of the meek, but of those who have been stripped down to truth and steel. These are the ones you displaced, the ones whose land you seized, whose shops you shuttered, whose homes you claimed in their weakest hour. They have nothing left to lose because you took it from them, and in this you have made them invincible. The contracts you wrote in the shadows are now paraded in the daylight, line by line. The false valuations, the inflated invoices, the bribes and kickbacks, all of it read aloud like a litany of your crimes. The names of the dead are recited not as statistics but as charges against you. Your recovery projects are laid bare as shells of corruption, monuments to greed built on the graves of the very people you claim to serve. Your wealth no longer shields you. Your gold is not currency here, it is evidence. The accounts you hid offshore are seized. The properties you bought through front companies are opened and emptied. The armed guards you trusted have melted away. They will not die for you. Those you once paid to protect your gates now stand at the head of the crowd, opening them. You stand alone, without the roar of approval, without the screens that once projected your image into every home. Now the images are of you, fumbling, cornered, pleading in the same voice you once used to demand and command. The nations watch, but not to save you. They watch to see what becomes of the carrion circle when the prey becomes the quarry. There is no negotiation now, no backroom escape. The law you bent to your will is now the rod in the hand of those you oppressed. The mercy you denied is the mercy you are shown. None. The sentence is not whispered, but shouted. It is not carried out in shadows, but in the full light of day. And when it is done, the record will not speak of your greatness, for there was none. It will speak of your hunger, your arrogance, your plunder. It will speak of how you mistook your ability to consume for the right to rule. And it will speak of your end, not as a tragedy, but as justice fulfilled. For the kingdoms of sand cannot stand when the tide comes in, and the tide has come. The same hands you scorn now level the ground where your throne once stood. The same streets you bled dry now flow with the voices of the free. And your name, once spoken with fear or flattery, is now a curse and a warning. Thus perishes the one who made the suffering of the weak their treasure. As for people, so too for the nation and nations. The nations stand weighed. Their rulers are naked beneath the gaze of the one who made them. Their systems, civil, military, financial, and spiritual, are measured and found in want. They have built their thrones on theft, clothed themselves in lies, and crowned themselves with the delusion of permanence. They have plundered the earth, devoured the weak, and mocked the judge, thinking his silence consent and his patience absence. They have weaponized disaster, commodified suffering, and called it wisdom. They have turned governance into extraction, law into oppression, and markets into harvest fields of the desperate. They have corrupted every trust, turning the shepherd into a wolf, the guard into a thief, the healer into a merchant. Their power rests on three pillars: deception, fear, and greed. All three now crack beneath the weight of truth, courage, and judgment. They imagine themselves sovereign, yet they are dust and water, breathing only because he lends them breath. They strut as if eternal, yet they are as grass, today green, tomorrow cut down and burned. They parade their might before him who weighs galaxies in his hand, as if the roar of their armies or the balance of their treasuries could stay his decree. They do not understand that the earth itself is his footstool. How much smaller, then, are they? The hour has come when their mechanisms turn inward, consuming themselves. The lies unravel, the fear dissolves, the greed devours its own. Their instruments of control, propaganda, surveillance, coercion become the very tools of their exposure. Their alliances fracture, their economies stall, their militaries strain to hold shadows. The people they oppress no longer bow, the nations they subdued no longer fear. And the Lord who sits enthroned above the circle of the earth laughs, not with amusement but with scorn. He holds them in derision. He summons the sword and the sickle. The kingdoms of sand begin to fall, wave after wave, until their banners lie in the mud and their names are remembered only as warnings. This is the singular point. There will be no rescue for the unrepentant. There will be no refuge for the proud. The tide will not recede. The harvest will not be delayed. The scales will not be stayed. What they have done to others will be done to them, and the measure will be full. The tip of the sword has found its mark, and the cut will not miss. Selah. As it is for people, so too for the nation and nations. Othniel Max Daves.
She looks for the end of time, lost and a broken life, and she doesn't want to know. She wants to turn away. All you're sure enough. Never take your eyes off love. She's falling. Never give up the truth for a lie. She's falling. Never take your eyes off love. She's falling. Never give up the truth for a lie. She's falling. Running circles, millstone life, recycle days and reunites. I see your face everywhere I go as you walk through the pale moonlight glow, dreaming abominations for the ones you love as she sells them for more. Never enough. days of the neon Noah, before the flood of fire. In these days of confusion, coming across the wires, where people don't know what is fake and what is real, where politicians chase fools' gold and sell what they can't steal. They sleepwalk with her, refusing to wake and see. She blinds their eyes with neon light, making money on the dim inside. She is falling, never trade truth for a lie, or you'll become like her, blinded in pride. Nothing real comes from counterfeits, nothing good comes from her false lights. Wearing grave clothes in the battlefield, we won't be defeated by what she tries to steal. We fight the shadows in God's grace, punching holes in a dark box of never enough waste. They pretend to be self-made by dollar bills, bottomless pits who never get to fill. Their success defeats in disguise, deceivers deceived by their own lies.